Warframe has an absurd amount of bizarre and over-the-top weapons. Without the proper mods, however, your bone-shattering freedom launcher will feel more like a lousy point-and-click adventure. But worry not, that's what I'm here for. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Kurojakku. Lately I've been dragging many fresh baby Tenno into Warframe, not to mention those poor wandering souls left behind by Destiny 2. So, with that in mind, I decided now is the perfect time to guide you all on the very basics Warframe fails to teach you. While later episodes of this guide will contain light spoilers, these first few will remain spoiler-free. Join me on this series as we break down all the complicated ins and outs, one step at a time. Like and sub for more Warframe content, and to stick around for future guides I'll be posting over the next few months. More about how you can support the channel at the end. This is the Lotus Guide to the basics of weapon modding. Hello, I am definitely the Lotus. Today we'll be focused on your primary and secondary weapons. Melee shall be saved for a later date since they do have their own unique systems going on, and Warframes have already been covered in its own video if you missed it last week. My goal here is to provide you all with both the information you need to truly learn the game rather than just copy it build, but also to suggest something specific for those of you not feeling experimental. Everything you see in the background will be using this very same loadout scene here. This build should easily get you up to and through the quest called the New War, where I will be changing up the loadout for more advanced modding tutorials later. You don't have to stick to the Thornback or Fierce either, as the same general logic will apply to most weapons in the game, especially this early on. On to the weapon stats and what they do. I'm gonna skim right along past a lot of the pretty self-explanatory things, fire rates, mag sizes, reload speeds, that sort of thing. You kind of already know what those do if you've played any game with a gun in it. Instead, we will focus on the more unique stats to Warframe that aren't as clear or direct, starting with a very strange one I've never seen in any other game, Multishot. At base, if you were to fire your Furus, a single bullet from the magazine would fire, well, a single bullet. Multishot increases the amount of individual damage instances per bullet without increasing the actual ammo consumption. So, a multishot of 2 is effectively doubling your base damage, while 2.5 would double it with a 50% chance to triple your base damage with each shot. Each individual instance of damage has its own chance to crit or inflict statuses, more on that later, and can even be seen if firing something with less than perfect accuracy. Things do get a bit funky with beam weapons. While they do technically scale with multi-shot, they don't actually split and multiply. Instead, all the multi-shot damage and status chance gets combined into a single beam source for every tick. Meanwhile, critical chance behaves as if there were no multi-shot at all. Critical hits then have two main stats: the critical chance, which determines how often you might crit, and critical damage is the multiplier applied when you crit. Let's start with critical damage. Suppose you have a weapon with 100 base damage and a 2 times crit multiplier. A crit will then do 200 damage. Adding extra crit damage mods to boost it to, say, a 3 times multiplier, it will now do 300 damage, and so on and so forth. It is pretty simple here. Crit chance has a little more going on with it, however. It is very clear how it works from 0 to 100. 100% crit chance means every single shot will crit and thus have that crit multiplier active. But what if you were to go beyond? This is where double, triple, and even quad crits come in. Look at crit chance as more like crit tiers, with every 100 being the next tier and anything in between being a chance to hit the next one up. A 150% crit weapon will always crit, with a 50% chance to have a tier 2 crit. Assuming you have a 2 times multiplier and a 100 damage weapon, that boosted crit will instead be 300 damage, as opposed to 200 damage. These numbers can get quite large and out of hand once you combine crit damage mods that increase that base multiplier, and then further amplify them with consistent higher crit tiers, taking a shot that would otherwise do 100% of its usual damage, up to doing more like 1000% of its total damage. And honestly, that is kind of lowballing it in a lot of cases when it comes to late game weapon builds. Then we have the status chance. It is fairly straightforward, but to break it down, your status chance is the likelihood a shot will trigger a status instance. Let's suppose we have exactly 100% status. Then every single shot inflicts some sort of status. Which effect that lands is a % chance based on the damage types you find on the weapon, weighted based on how much of your damage comes from any given source. Sounds a little confusing. For example, a weapon with 100 damage like before, 50 of it being slash, 25 puncture, and 25 impact, you will then have a 50% chance to inflict a slash status, and 25 each for the other two. Any status chance over that 100% is basically starting a fresh instance altogether. So 150 status means every shot will proc, while 50% of them will proc 2 statuses, each of them then rolling that same damage type pool individually. So you could get double slash procs or a slash and a puncture. Status tends to do best on high rate of fire weapons or high multi-shot builds, if not both. I'm not going to go over the nitty-gritty when it comes to all the various damage types and the procs that they provide in this video, just for the sake of time, as there is a lot to go over there. But worry not, I will have a dedicated status guide in the near future, just to keep it all in one bite-sized place. Now that we've gone over the various stats, let's take a look at the example builds I've been using in all this footage you've seen in the background. Now, the weapons you'll have early on tend to be pretty poor, with really bad base stats, generally not worth investing into. The Thornback I'm using comes with a free catalyst installed, and the Furus is actually, secretly, don't tell anyone, a late game death ray and actually worth hanging on to long term. So there is really no harm here in pouring Catalyst and Forma into that one in particular, but general rule of thumb, if a weapon is not at Prime, Kuva, Tenet, Coda, or some other event weapon like a Dex or a Wraith, or basically if it doesn't have some sort of extra name applied to it, then it is likely worth tossing aside after Mastery. There are rare exceptions to this rule. You can always look it up to see if a weapon is good or not. Quest weapons as well, you may as well keep and safely max out as they don't have better variants either. The exception to this are Incarnate adapters, but more on that in the mid-game advanced guide. Since our current options are so lame, it's not really worth investing heavily into a crit or status build. We simply don't have the base stats to do so. I've gone for consistent damage sources rather than relying on RNG. First, Serration for base damage, as this increases your overall damage everything else will scale from. My Elemental combo for an extra 180%, scaling off of that base damage. Quick little tip, always use elemental mods over physical mods. It's not made very clear, but even though a 90% heat mod and a 90% slash mod look identical on the surface, they do not behave the same at all. You see, elemental mods will scale off the total base damage of the weapon. We'll keep that 100 damage example earlier. A heat mod would give us 90 heat damage on top of the 50 slash and the 25 puncture and impact for a total of 190. This would also sway your status proccing, but we'll come back to that in another video. Meanwhile, the slash mod would only scale off the slash total, that being 50 in this example, for a far smaller increase of around, I think, 145 damage in total. I'm going to be honest, I'm being lazy and I'm not going to do the math. The bigger your numbers get, the more drastic this gap becomes. There are extremely niche builds that may want extra IPS stats, but that's not that relevant this early on. Multishot then multiplies everything further and is far easier to get than crit is on a weaker weapon with low base stats while having a very similar effect. And I rounded out with a dual stat toxin mod that can be found from random vor spawns in the void. For elementals, I run magnetic on my Thornback to break overguard quickly, and corrosive on my Furus to shred armor with each proc that lands. If you want a solid catch-all damage type that'll do well against pretty much every faction, corrosive is your best friend. Both of these builds worked great in the level 50 to 60 void missions, but did start to fall off in the 70 plus range, especially against any armored targets like in Kuva Fortress. It will, however, more than serve you to get through the main quest and obtain some far better hardware. That is all I have for you today. All the footage you've seen has been using this very build, and like I mentioned, I will show off my melee in the next chapter as there are some unique melee mechanics to go over. If you're new, then sub and stick around for next week's guide and all the other things that I have planned. If you're an experienced Tenno, again, still don't know why you watched this, but thank you, and please send this to any baby Tenno you know and share any advice you may have in the comments below. Again, just be mindful of spoilers. You can support my work further and become a channel member for just $1 a month, putting your name right on this list next to all the others on every video going forward. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.